Well, good morning to you, Anand, and I have with me two very special guests. It's Michael Kugelman, who happens to be the senior.
Well, Megha, go ahead. You're live on air. We're watching. Go ahead. I believe you have Mr. Michael Kugelman with you.
I'm assuming you... All right. All right, I'm assuming you'll be able to hear me. So I was just introducing my guest to you. I have with me the Senior Associate Fellow for South Asia at the Wilson Center, Michael Kugelman. And on my other side, I have a senior journalist. He happens to be the Washington editor for USA Today. Gentlemen, very good morning to you.
Great to be
right?
here.
And now that we are joining it from right in front of the White House, one big day that is going to be today, much anticipated, much talked about. This visit gets underway in less than 5 hours, Michael. What do you, I mean, I've read all your pieces. Huh? You've listed out the things that you think Donald Trump should bring up with Modi and what Mr. Narendra Modi should bring up, more importantly, with the US president. What do you make of, how do you think it's all going to go from here?
Well, I mean, with President Trump, he is, if nothing, not unpredictable. Perhaps the most unpredictable president in U.S. history. So from the U.S. end, it's hard to predict. I think it'll be a very positive meeting. I think that at the end of the day, this is a chance for two men to meet each other who have never met each other before. So I think there's going to be a lot of positivity. There's going to be a lot of talk about various things. Not much substantive talk, should I say. But there'll be a lot of talk about a lot of different issues. There'll be a lot of focus, particularly from Modi, in terms of how much shared interest there are on things like terrorism, for instance, China to a lesser extent. So I think there'll be a lot of talk about various things, but at the end of the day, we should keep our expectations low. It's a meeting among two men who have never met each other before, just trying to feel each other out, size each other up, and try to get a sense of how each one feels about the other and about the relationship more broadly.
Well, keeping expectations low is exactly what everybody's doing on both sides. But one more question to you before I toss to Ray. Michael, do you think that there's going to be substantive talk, there would be any sort of convergence when it comes to issues like cross-border terrorism? Will there be some sort of an agreement when it comes to taking concrete action against Pakistan? Because that's what India is suffering from, and that's where we are looking forward to a very strong a helping hand from United States, especially under this president who has talked about eliminating radical Islamic terror.
Well, I mean, if there's one U.S. president that you would expect to see eye to eye on India when it comes to terrorism in Pakistan, it would be Trump. He is very tough on terror. He sees it in very black and white. He thinks that any terror group, regardless of what it looks like or what form it takes, should be dealt with. And that would include the likes of Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed. I do think, though, that the Trump administration will be much more focused on the Haqqani network and the Afghan Taliban, which are groups that target
What about
U.S.
Pakistan?
interests. Oh, absolutely, yeah. But I think Pakistan, well, I don't think Pakistan is going to change its position much at all. This is something, I think that the idea of the U.S. having leverage over Pakistan, being in a position to get Pakistan to deal with these groups, is not really as much as we may suggest. But I think because Trump is all about America first, he's going to want to target on the terror groups that threaten U.S. interests the most. And let's face it, the Haqqani network and the Afghan Taliban, they target U.S. troops. The Haqqani network has several Americans being held hostage, as I understand. I'm sure someone has told Trump that Americans died in the Mumbai terror attacks as well. But I do think that, unfortunately, in the context of the U.S.-India relationship, there will be more focus from Trump in terms of those other types of terror groups that go after Afghanistan.
Ray, Michael, in fact, I'll ask you more questions on the entire issue of terrorism. But before that, I want to take one question with you, Ray. The other day we talked about the points of divergence that could actually come up in this meeting. Issues like the immigration policy, issues like the H-1B visa. Those are contentious issues, and the sense that we are getting from both sides is that they might just not want to talk about it this time around. They might just keep it off the table. What's the sense that you are getting? I mean, you've been reporting and you have a team of reporters that have been giving you information about this.
Well, we think there's going to be some kind of conversation about it. Whether it's on the presidential prime minister level, not sure. I'm sure the people below them will talk about it extensively. It's a major issue for both countries, particularly for India. And India is here to push an agenda. They have things they want from the United States, and that's only logical that they'll talk about that. But I agree with Michael. The expectations are low because Trump is not a detail guy. He reacts to people. And one of the concerns, as we mentioned, about terrorism is what we saw when he went to Saudi Arabia Arabia last month, they filled his ears full of talk about Qatar, and then he made some imprudent statements that only heightened the problems there. So he could meet with Modi, talk about Pakistan, say something that he felt at the time because Modi talked to him about it, and it might not be the right policy for the United States. So that's something to look out for. They're making a joint statement in the Rose Garden at 5 o'clock this afternoon, and we'll get a better sense then of what's happening.
But, Ray, these two men, this is the first meeting that's going to happen between these two leaders. One person who's perhaps born into wealth, somebody who inherited from his father, a big businessman. Another person, the Indian Prime Minister, is a self-made person. These two men will be holed up in one room for at least 20 minutes officially, if not more, if that overruns that time. What do you think? I mean, what's going to be? You think the personal bonhomie that was there, the way President Obama and Narendra Modi hit it off the first time, you think we are going to see a replication of what happened between the two of them?
I think it's possible. I mean, Trump is somebody who wants to be liked. He wants to be appreciated. I'm sure Prime Minister Modi knows that, and he's very good at that, good at establishing relationships. He's been very successful. I mean, in the case of Modi, he's somebody who's overcome problems on the human rights front before he became Prime Minister, and now some people care about it, and there will be protests here today about that, but they see him as a dynamic leader, and so I think Trump responds well to that, and I think Modi is savvy enough to know how to play with Trump.
To what extent do you think one should be attaching significance to the personal equation between the two?
Well, a lot. I mean, you noted that they do have some differences in terms of their backgrounds, but right now there's a lot in comparison, similarity in terms of their conservative politics, their contentious relationships with the media, though of course they also embrace social media on the other hand. But I think it is particularly important, the personal relationship, because there are more irritants, I think, in the relationship now than there were in previous years because of H-1B issues and, trade policies of the Trump administration. And so I think that you need that extra step, that extra push of goodwill that could help get this relationship, which is very strong and very healthy to be sure, but it could help it make it even stronger.
Michael, you used the word bromance. I mean, I read your story the other day. That's the kind of equation we saw, the warmth we saw between the two of them. And, a lot of people say that actually worked wonders and excellently well in taking forward the relationship between India and US and perhaps strengthening it even more. Now, is that an expectation? I mean, the kind of person President Trump is and the kind of person Prime Minister Modi is, I mean, both of them are very headstrong. But what's the expectation on that aspect?
Well, I mean, it's true. They are very much into personal diplomacy, that's for sure. Who knows if we could see something like a bear hug, which would be that would be a big thing for the cameras. But I think we shouldn't overstate this notion of bromance in a personal relationship. There was one with Obama, but I think in this case the major focus should be on trying to figure out how far this relationship could go. There's a lot of potential. The defense relationship is really on a roll right now, and I think could get even better in terms of more deals and things like that. So I think that by focusing on the personal side, we sort of get away from the major substantive issues. But I go to what I said before. This notion of a bromance could be a good thing, because if there's a degree of personal goodwill and personal bonhomie between these two men, it could help the countries get over some of the invariable tension points, which will be coming in the coming months, I imagine, and tension points that I think are more prevalent than they were when we had Obama in power.
Well, so the meeting actually gets underway by 12:50, if I'm not mistaken, goes on till 1:10 today in the afternoon, after which the bilateral takes over. And then we are hoping that there would be joint remarks and the media is going to be allowed. In the morning, I read that, earlier there were reports that nobody, and in fact we were told by our government that no questions would be taken. But today in the morning, we've been given indication that perhaps one question from the two sides would be taken by both the President and the Prime Minister. What do you think was going to be the agenda which would be the top on the priority when it comes to the list of United States? I'm not talking about my own country, but the priority for President Trump.
I think they'll be looking at some kind of thing with H-1B visas. That's a big thing on Trump's list. And then terrorism, probably.
Okay.
Those would be the two.
That's how U.S. would look at it.
Yeah, I think so. And, talk about the relationship between the two men. I think that's important. But in the end, I see there's a major convergence between Indian and U.S. interests. And those things are only going to get deeper as India's economy keeps growing, the tech sector, the linkage between Silicon Valley and people in New York. As you saw yesterday with the meeting with the people from the Indian diaspora here, all that is growing and growing and growing. And that will supersede, I think, what happens with Modi and Trump today.
You mentioned about the event yesterday. Michael, I would ask you this question, this is a no-frill attached visit of the Prime Minister. We've seen huge events organized in his honor. We've seen Madison Square. We've seen San Jose's event. Yesterday, even the Prime Minister,
if I can interrupt,
talked
Megha,
about
if I can interrupt you right now,
saying that there was a lot of pressure
can you
on
hear me,
him,
Megha?
To conduct yes,
Megha, sorry, I know you've got two very strong voices in Ray Locker and Michael Kugelman with you, but we also have Mr. Darrell West and Eric Gomes with us, and they've been listening to your conversation. Why don't you gentlemen also dwell upon the Prime Minister's editorial today, where he talks about GST, he talks about the major points of convergence. Do they agree, disagree that this is common grounds? This will actually set the base to attract America to invest in India?
Well, certainly I think there are great opportunities for investment, American investment in India, just because it is such a growth market. And as some of the other commentators have pointed out, America does want India to serve as a counterweight to China. So President Trump has already met with President Xi. They have developed a good working relationship. They are easing over some of the tensions there. And Prime Minister Modi is going to want to do exactly the same thing for India, to keep India front and center for the United States.
Well, Megha, that was Darrell West, President and Director, Governance Studies, Brookings, with his point of view there. Why don't you take us through, before I go across to Mr. Eric Gomes, what Ray Locker and Michael Kugelman feel about the Prime Minister's editorial in the Wall Street Journal today? Do they feel that that's going to set the ground, and perhaps it also gives us an insight into what will be discussed? Megha, you hear me? Well, I think we've just lost that phone line with Megha right outside with Ray Locker and Michael Kugelman. We'll go across in just a bit, but going across to Mr. Gomes. Eric, where do you think the biggest stumbling block will be, or will they not talk about those, but talk about what's attractive for both the leaders?
Well, I think on the security side, the issue of the nuclear security working group is something that has not really been discussed a lot in the press leading up to this meeting. And I think in terms of what it could do to U.S.-China relations, I think that has a good chance of causing friction between the United States and China if the United States forcefully advocates for India's inclusion on the NSG. So I think that's one area of potential friction that is being, at least at the sort of public level, sort of pushed under the radar for now. But it might come up in private discussion, we don't know.
Well, I'm just going to try and see if Megha's back with us, and we get... Megha, can you hear me? Now, we heard Mr. Darrell West and Eric Gomes talk about the points of convergence and what they would discuss. I was hoping that you, between Michael and Ray, can talk us through the Prime Minister's editorial in the Wall Street Journal. Have they read through it? What do they think about it? Does that set the base and the grounds for the engagement with President Trump?
Well, yes, of course they have, and I was just talking to Michael about it. The editorial in the Wall Street Journal written by the Indian Prime Minister, and if I'm quoting from there, he's talked about the growing convergence between India and the United States, and of course he's talked about the shared values and the stability of our systems. He says confidence in each other's political values and a strong belief in each other's prosperity has enabled our engagement to grow. Our vision of joint success and progress guides our partnership, is all that he says. And of course, you've read the entire article, Michael. He goes on to talk about the economic ties. What do you make of it? Because that's not where our priorities lie. You think there's a shift in the stand?
Yeah, I was surprised by the piece, and then it did seem to focus on economic issues, which is perhaps the area where you have the least amount of potential for cooperation in this relationship today. I mean, otherwise, it certainly was a very feel-good piece. It did avoid hot-button terms like H-1B. Pakistan wasn't really mentioned that well. So in some sense, the op-ed may reflect some of the tone that Modi will bring to the meeting today. You know, feel-good, positive, optimistic, talking about shared convergences and shared interest. I imagine there won't be as much focus at the meeting on the economic issues, because I do think that the major potential for this relationship moving forward is on the defense side. Economics, certainly it could be going places, but it's not going to be going places as quickly as the defense relationship.
Well, Ray, tell me, you think there's going to be any transactive arrangement between the two countries on this issue, on H-1B visa?
Not yet. I don't think so. We got to leave here. I don't really think it's going to be that big on H-1B in terms of substantive. I think they'll talk about it in general, and I think the economic.
You're right, they are. As the time gets closer for this meeting, perhaps people will be asked to move out.
Economic stuff is a big deal, and that sets that up.
But all right, so we from the space. We'll try and give us a moment.
Yeah, we stay with you live as you guys walk around and move to an area where you can.
We are happening.
Right.
We've been asked to take our equipments and move from here a bit.
Right here.
So that's the security of the White House.
Well,
usually,
as you
in
find
fact,
a better
I've been
spot,
here
I'm just going to
almost
take
4
this.
to 5 times in the last 3 days, and the security. The security here is never, they don't ask you to move out of this place. In fact, I'll ask Salim to show you the street that is always, it's closed for traffic, but for all all right, so that's the security from White House, from people from the Secret Service now, asking us to vacate this place. We've been doing our lives from here almost every day, but today, this perhaps the reason is this meeting. It's this meeting, and that's the reason why even the visitors have been asked to vacate the place. So maybe Salim can show you all these visitors there who are now making their way out from the park. This is the park right in front of White House, and it's the park there. Rahul, Anand, the big pardon. So this is this park where, the throngs with visitors almost all through the day, and people throng in front of the White House taking pictures. You can get really close to the White House, but today that's not the case. It's a special day today, and that's the reason why at least 4 hours to go, in fact more than 4 hours to go before the meeting gets underway. You're seeing people from the Secret Service asking everybody now to not only vacate the street in front of White House, but the park as well. So perhaps today visitors are not going to be allowed. The dog squad is here, people from Secret Service are here, and now we've been asked to make our way out of the park. So we're trying to, we will have to,
We're still with you.
I think,
Talk us through what's happening around you, and
for us to catch up with my guests. They have walked ahead, and yes, Anand will take a minute or so to catch up with our guests because they're walking ahead, and there are lots of people who've been now asked to vacate the park. It's a walk out from here to the main street, and we're hoping at least there we'll be allowed to station ourselves. So this obviously the preparation for the Modi-Trump meeting. I have to actually bring this point, Anand. I have to tell you about this. The hotel, the Village Hotel. Can we stand here?
No, we can go all the way out.
Go all the way to the street?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
right, Megha, as you, Ray, and Michael make your way all the way to the street, we're just going to take a very, very short break. We'll take a very short commercial break, and then we join you back on Nation Wants to Know with Megha Prasad live with Michael Kuban and Ray Lockhart.
Well, welcome back on the special edition that we are bringing to you from Washington, D.C. In fact, from right in front of the White House. And it feels a bit like Guantanamo Bay with this fence right behind me, and we've been all pushed out of the park where we're stationed and we're talking to our guests. But I guess this is a fence that we can make do with it and perhaps get a glimpse of the White House at the same time. But Ray, I want to ask you this question. You've also been a reporter here in this city. How secure is this place? Is this place right in front of the White House? Because, you know, every day I see tourists thronging at the main gate. We've all shot in this park in the last 3-4 days. Why, you know, this special arrangement, security, of course, now taking this entire area up. How often do you think this happens?
Well, it happens whenever a foreign leader visits the White House. They clear out the park to keep people from coming into the area where cars drive up and down. There's a lot of security vehicles. Sometimes they stay at a home across that street over there called Blair House, so that adds an extra degree of security. It's become a more and more routine thing. Even with Obama, we had problems with people climbing over the White House fence trying to get into the White House. So the security forces are definitely more on alert, particularly when you have the leader of the second most populous country in the world going to be right here, right now.
Yeah, but how often has it happened during or from the time President Trump has taken over?
Oh, I walk around here all the time. I'd say it happens every other day.
Oh,
something like this, yes.
It does. Okay, but, you know, Michael, asking you the same question, actually. The place, the hotel where the Prime Minister is staying, we've been going there every day. And I have to tell you this, that on all the three sides of that hotel, you have huge trucks that are chained. And, you know, just to ensure that no one gets anywhere closer to the building. And there's a special exit and entry that the Prime Minister is taking. So is that what we see for every head of state who comes here?
Absolutely, I would say so. This is typical treatment in the post 9/11 era. I mean, you just this is a city that's always, under ordinary circumstances, heavily secured. And certainly when you have a top leader, and particularly from a country like India, you're going to have these types of security measures. So, you know, for Ray and I here who live in the city, this is really quite routine, I should say.
Well, you know, we've seen these incidents, we've seen terror incidents happening in Europe in the past few months. Very often gets repeated in France, in UK. Every other time we hear of these, tragic events happening in Europe. To what extent do you think the soil of United States is getting affected by what's happening there? And what's the level of danger that is being perceived in this country as far as Islamic terror is concerned?
Well, certainly this is an issue that the Trump administration has highlighted again and again and again and again, and it will continue to do so. I mean, certainly there's a lot of concern in this town and in this country about the state of terror these days, and certainly in terms of what has been happening in Europe, where you essentially have militants that are not necessarily formally aligned with ISIS or any other terror group that are inspired and stage horrific attacks. So, you know, we've been very lucky in this town in recent years. But certainly, I think that there's always the risk, there's always concern, and you know, this will certainly be something that Modi and Trump will talk about. That you know, no one is immune from the threats of terrorism, whether you're standing here in Washington or whether you're in New Delhi or many places in between.
Well, Ray, this is one aspect where a lot of people, you know, all analysts say that there's going to be a huge convergence. In the country, India is wrecked by Islamic terror emanating out of Pakistan in that area. So, to what extent do you think this particular issue is going to attain significance when it comes to the talks in the bilateral today? You think that even in that one-on-one that's going to happen in 20 minutes, because both these leaders have talked about eliminating terror extensively, you think that's going to come up?
I'm sure they'll talk about it, and they'll have a lot of points of agreement. Obviously, no one wants terrorism, and they're concerned about it emanating from parts of Islam. Now, how deep Trump will go into it, whether he'll do exactly whatever, you know, Prime Minister Modi wants, that remains to be seen. But they share that interest. Now, as mentioned earlier, the concern is that Trump may be encouraged or excited by something Modi says and agree to something that maybe he doesn't need to agree with. And after all, like it or not, Pakistan is a player in this, and we need Pakistan as the United States for help in Afghanistan and elsewhere. So we can't go as far as the Indians would like in condemning what Pakistan does. And that's been the dance we've been doing for decades.
Well, fair point made. Megha, I'm just
sense, but
Megha,
when it comes to the joint statement, you think that, yes, Anand.
Megha, I know you've been talking about terror and
Yes, Anand, go ahead.
and the equations that America has with Pakistan, given its concerns with Afghanistan. I'm just bringing in Eric Gomes, who's been also listening patiently to Ray Locker and Michael over there. Eric, because the Prime Minister yesterday, while addressing the Indian diaspora, made a specific mention of surgical strikes and the reason India had to do it, saying that we exercise restraint, but we know how to defend our territory. And he wanted to make a specific mention about Pakistan. Do you believe that the Trump administration will take serious view? Because we are given to understand that the joint statement could focus on terror quite a bit, cross-border terrorism specifically.
Well, I think the Trump administration could be looking for just something different on Afghanistan. The United States has been there now for 16 years, and it hasn't, other strategies haven't really worked. So I think the administration has a desire to might be more willing to try new things in regards to our relations with Pakistan that were previously not considered. So I think there could be an opening there if Modi wants to push on that. But the other fact of this is that Trump seems to be giving up a lot of the decision-making priority or the decision-making to the military. So whether or not, Trump is the right person to be talking to on this, or General Mattis as Secretary of Defense, remains to be seen. But I think there might be an opportunity for something unique or something that moves that were previously considered off the table.
Well, Eric Gomes, thank you for your inputs, and I thank all our panelists and our guests for joining us. Megha, you've had a great chat with Michael and Ray Locker there. I have to wind up this leg of Nation Wants to Know and our focus on the Modi-Trump meet, but this continues on the other side. So I hope you stay on with us. We take a very short break, turning around, and it's the News Watch with Navika Kumar up next at 7 p.m. Do stay with us.
Pakistan caught red-handed. Here's the proof, Mr. Trump. Can Trump avoid taking a side? Watch India Up Front with Rahul Shivshankar tonight at 8 p.m. Tonight, the massive terror build-up. Pak shadow over summit. Exclusive news break on News Hour.
हाँ जी आ रही है